All right, stand by. 10 seconds to go.
Talent. Ready, camera.
And cue talent.
One.
Roll for record.
A Texas sheriff's deputy was shot dead while pumping gas in an unprovoked assassination. And people are asking, do cops' lives matter too? I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. The suspect in Texas isn't talking about why he did it and has a history of being ruled mentally incompetent to stand trial, but he is black and the deputy is white. So some people are drawing conclusions, including Harris County Sheriff Ron Hickman, who condemns the very dangerous national rhetoric against police. Here's some of what he had to say.
I will echo also what the DA mentioned is some of the very dangerous national rhetoric that's out there today. Our system of justice absolutely requires law enforcement to be present to protect our community. So at any point when the rhetoric ramps up to the point where calculated, cold-blooded assassination of police officers happened, this rhetoric has gotten out of control. We've heard Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Well, cops' lives matter too. So why don't we just drop the qualifier and just say lives matter?
The officer killed was 47-year-old Darren Goforth. He was shot in the back 15 times. Some reports say that the suspect unloaded every bullet in the chamber into this poor police officer. Just hours after his cold-blooded killing, Black Lives Matter protesters were out chanting "pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon" at the Minnesota State Fair. Some protest organizers are denying it, but the phrase "pigs in a blanket" has commonly been used to refer to dead cops wrapped in body bags. And while reprehensible, that makes sense in the context of an anti-police protest, whereas chanting about food just doesn't make sense. Increasingly, police feel like they're under siege from a hostile public, and the numbers are alarming. Veteran officer and father of four, Joe Glenowitz, just became the 26th cop killed in the line of duty so far this year after he was shot in the head, reportedly after a traffic stop just north of the city of Chicago. Fox News' Elizabeth Hasselbeck even asked the crucial question, has Black Lives Matter become a hate group? After an explosive and largely false narrative of police murder resulted in riots in Ferguson and elsewhere, has the rhetoric gone too far? Have we decided to give the lives of often violent criminals the same weight as the police who protect us from these people? Or are the protesters justified? To explore this question and much, much more, we turn to our pal Scott Ott, who's a PJTV contributor and author from his home studio in Dallas, Texas. Joining me here in toasty Southern California, stand-up comic and PJTV contributor Stephen Cruiser. Cruiser, we'll start with you. I remember after the Oklahoma City bombing, when Timothy McVeigh blew up that federal building, Bill Clinton came out and effectively blamed the contract with America and the Republican Revolution in 1994. Clinton, of course, got hammered in that midterm election. The Republicans were riding high. Clinton was at his lowest point in his presidency. And then he used that opportunity to blame anti-government rhetoric, and then his poll numbers started to rebound, and he was ultimately able to successfully win re-election in 1996. Should Republicans go out in public and effectively make that same argument right now against these anti-cop protesters, these Black Lives Matter protesters, and say, you know what, your rhetoric has gotten so hot that people are getting picked off right and left, and if you weren't out chanting things like pigs in a blanket, maybe this wouldn't happen?
Yes, because it's true in this case. It's very much so the case here. You've got professional agitators going out spewing. Social media is one of the things that was not in play back in 1995 that we're dealing with now, too. There are so many erroneous facts being disseminated via social media about the statistics about how many killings there are, with no context whatsoever. That fuels a lot of this too. So it's fueling anger. When they go to these places like Ferguson, they're agitating for violence. That's what nobody was mad when the place started burning down. And this has been going on. I saw an argument today about somebody was saying, well, there aren't as many cops not as many cops have been killed this year at the same point last year. But the difference is now there's more context. You didn't see executions going on last year. This started when the media decided to confer sainthood upon Michael Brown. Okay, it was a guy that even the Holder Justice Department couldn't get behind. But the media went with the false narrative on Michael Brown all along, and it's been inciting people ever since, because there are millions of people in America who still think Michael Brown was unjustly killed and was never at fault there.
Scott, is the temperature as hot now as it was in the 60s and 70s in terms of this anti-police feeling that we have right now on the left?
I don't know that, because I was a baby, essentially, during the 60s. I mean, I escaped from the 60s at the age of 9, I think. And so I really don't know how to place that in context. And if you read it historically, you just get the Polaroid snapshot. And I think that's the risk here, frankly. Here's the problem. If you're on the side of liberty, if you're a conservative or even a Republican, and you look at situations like this, you go, you know what? There was a shooting. The justice process needs to do its work, and we need to find out who did it, what was the cause, instead of immediately leaping into the narrative and saying, this will prove a nice illustration from my point of view. I'm going to throw this into the service of my narrative right away. That's what the left does, and they do it very effectively. And you say, well, if they're being effective with it, shouldn't we use their tactics as well? Shouldn't we take every cop killing and make that illustrative of the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement is creating a hostile atmosphere on the streets? I don't know if that's the case. I think the problem with the Black Lives Matter movement can be handled on in its own right, by its own lights. It doesn't have to, you don't have to pull these cases that 48 hours later, we already know why somebody was gunned down. We just don't.
Generally, before you, please, can I say this? Generally, I agree with exactly what Scott said there about tactics. But in this case, I actually do believe it's become an insightful hate group. That's why I'm not just co-opting their tactics because I think that's useful.
I'm not saying it's not an insightful hate group, Stephen. I'm just saying that to use these cases, just the way the Black Lives Matter movement has taken, the Michael Brown case or the case in Baltimore, and they say, oh, well, this is an illustration of what a terrible problem we have in this country. I frankly don't know what the statistics are. I don't know if it's getting better or it's getting worse. As you know, violent crime in general has been going down for years, and yet people have no problem saying,
up,
oh,
though.
look, there was a guy who was shot, so it must be going back up. I don't think you could take that on a month-to-month basis, John.
Okay. Well, it is going back up, and attacks on police officers are also going up, and I believe that's in part because of the rhetoric. When you have people on television effectively saying, yeah, you don't have to listen to a police officer. You can do whatever it is that you want. If you want to go for the gun, go for the gun. We'll create some false narrative and said that you got shot in the back. Despite what the facts say, despite what we learned from the physical evidence, the Michael Brown case, and I'm going to throw the media in with the protesters on this one because they had journalistic malfeasance throughout that entire case, where the facts just became a jump ball. And when you embolden people to disobey the police and have no respect for the police, and then you just put out information that's just patently not true and make them look like cold-blooded killers that are out killing blacks for fun, then yeah, you're going to end up with killings like this.
Yeah, I don't see how you can look at it any other way at the moment. I fault the media entirely and the President of the United States going back to that beer summit incident with the professor a few years ago, where the first thing he did was blame the cops. The cops acted stupidly, he said. And then in the Trayvon Martin thing, they kind of defaulted against, they're always faulting law enforcement for whatever they're doing. The Trayvon wasn't the way they handled it. They blamed the cops for the way they handled the George Zimmerman when they brought him into custody. But there was a tone set by the president for defaulting to the cops being wrong in the first place without ever getting any information first. And that's what started this whole ball rolling. And again, we're going to have to look at the world in a completely different way now because of the way these wildfires can start on social media. It's so much worse now than it used to be. And I don't know if it's at the same fever pitch as it was in the 60s, but I know if it gets close, it's going to get much worse because of social media.
Scott, talk to me about the politics of all of this. Did the Democrats dodge a bullet in that in Iowa and New Hampshire, they're very white states, we haven't had any incidents of police officers being killed that have generated this type of attention in recent months. And so the Democrats running for president don't have to go out and kiss the ring of these protesters as they would if, say, Illinois was one of the first states, or Florida or California or New York. Did they dodge a bullet by not having to go kiss their ring here?
Well, your violent rhetoric is very disturbing, John, this whole dodging a bullet thing, but at least they dodged it. I guess it's better than get hit by the bullet. I don't think they're dodging it, actually. I think they're being dogged by these protesters who are basically, essentially trying to make the Democrats kiss the ring of the Black Lives Matter movement and then saying, forget it, you're not going far enough. Part of it is because this so-called movement is really a very small nucleus of people who are right now trying to figure out what it is they stand for. A couple of weeks ago, they actually released 4 people got together and released a platform for the Black Lives Matter movement, but it was just their suggestion. So I just think that there is a season of discontent among black activists by and large, and frankly, the average person living in the city who says, you know, hey, it was bad enough when the gangs were shooting up our communities, and now they're getting this narrative that somehow the police are a threat to them too. I thought we were supposed to rely upon the police for protection. I don't think anybody wins politically in this issue. And frankly, I think it's almost become impossible to have a reasonable civic discourse about this because of nonsense like grabbing each one of these cases and saying, see, this proves my point.
You know, when you look at state and local elections, one of the unions that's the biggest contributor to Democrats typically are the police unions. The police unions are very powerful in big cities, including Chicago. And one of the things that these unions do is they typically endorse Democrats, and they give money to Democrats because the Democrats are with them on the pensions, the Democrats are with them on the contracts, the Democrats are with them on traditional labor issues. But when you have a killing, when you have an assassination like what we've seen, it's the Democrats that are out there giving cover to the agitators. At what point do the police unions say, you know what, we like the fact that the Democrats give us all the goodies, but if you're not going to be there when we need you, when we're under siege, when we're under attack, then we're going to have to find an alternative?
As soon as they frame it in terms of, if I'm not going to be alive to enjoy the goodies, what good are the goodies? Because when you're looking now, am I going to survive this right now? If I can be executed while putting gas into my car, you know, that they're going to have to frame it in those harsh reality. I mean, what's more important, surviving, staying alive, or making sure I've got some Cadillac pension over here, you know? So they're going to have to frame it in terms like that at some point, and do it some point soon. And the worst part about this right now is that even if you took everything that the Black Lives Matter group says as fact, even if you believe that, what's happening now is making the cops skittish. It's making them, which is likely to lead to more violence now. There are going to be some hair trigger. Some cops are saying, no, we're backing off. Sooner or later, there's going to be a tipping point where they might be reacting even quicker now because they think everybody approaching them is going to kill them.
All right, Stephen Cruiser, you get the last word. That's all the time we have for today, but now it's your turn. Is Black Lives Matter a hate group? Tell us what you think in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.